I'm so excited to be on stage today to introduce you to a lot of illuminaries. So first, we have Crystal Barnes. Yay, Crystal. She is an SVP. She's an SVP doing corporate social responsibility and ESG at Paramount. Next, we have Adwoa. She is the Chief People Officer at Hearst. Then we have Karen Gray. She's a Chief HR Officer and Chief Diversity Officer at AE Networks. And then finally, we have Tasja Kirkwood. She is the VP of Global Consumer Insights at Mattel. Okay, let's get started.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I know we only have names and titles, so what I think we should get started is to get to know them a little bit. So maybe we can go down the panel, and if you can start, Crystal, share a little bit more about how you got started in your journey in media and how you got here.
Yes, so first of all, thanks for having us, and hello, y'all. Okay, so Crystal Barnes, I work at Paramount currently. Prior to that, I worked at Nielsen, the TV ratings company, for 16 years. Every time I say that, it makes me like amazed. But so I started in media wanting to understand the business of media, which is why I started at Nielsen. I knew that when I was in college, I was a broadcasting major, journalism minor, that I loved to storytell. But I also realized that in order to be able to tell accurate and complete and authentic stories, you need to be able to understand fully the business that you're representing. And so for me, that was Nielsen and understanding the research and the insights and how the industry really ticks and runs. And so I did that for the 16 years, and now I'm at Paramount, where my role is to lead corporate responsibility. So that's everything from our volunteering to our philanthropy to I also lead our ESG, which is sustainability work across the organization, and also figuring out how we continue to encourage diverse creators to be in front of and behind the camera, and how that then resonates with our audiences and allows us to tell, again, complete and accurate and authentic stories. So it's been a journey. I love it because it allows me to harness what I have access to at a corporation and share it with my community, the communities that I come from. And so it's a role that I encourage folks to consider as they're entering into the media and entertainment space, because you don't realize the diversity of opportunities that are available to you, which is why it's important that you all are sitting in these seats and hearing from professionals like the ones on this panel.
Awesome. Adwoa?
All right. Thanks so much, Crystal. Thanks so much, Tiffany. Hey, everybody. So my name is Adwoa. I'm Chief People Officer at Hearst Magazines. I have been with Hearst for about a year. I've been doing HR for several years. I majored in psychology in undergrad and went to graduate school for industrial organizational psychology. So you can do kind of a couple of things. You can go consulting usually or human resources when you go that route. And I really was passionate around the impact that experiences at work have on people's sense of self and their whole psyche, back to my psychology background. And I was in a number of different industries over my HR career, but this is my second stint in media. I was at Comcast for 5 years, and then now my year here at Hearst Magazines. And the media piece speaks to me because when I was in undergrad, I did a lot of research as a psych major, and my senior year thesis was about the impact of the media on body image of Black women in America. And I knew the impact that the media had on me as a young girl, as a teenager and a young adult, and I really was always so passionate around being connected to brands that spoke to me and brands that have impact outside of the world. So the media industry in particular was one that I felt like if people have good experiences at work and they create amazing content that sends messages into the world that all individuals of all gender identities will perceive about their sense of self, like that work actually has impact that ripples across the globe. So that was the connection for me to say media is a place where I could be and add impact. So I'm thrilled to be here today and doing what I do for Hearst, and I'm excited to have the dialogue today.
Yeah. Karen?
Hi, everybody. I am Karen Gray. I'm so happy to be here. My story is really a journey of trying to figure out what you want to do. I'm 52 years old, and I only figured it out about 4 years ago, so maybe this is a helpful tale or a tale of what not to do. I started off, I was a trained opera singer, and I'm a little hoarse today because in Make Better Choices, I was doing karaoke last night with my friends from high school until late. There's that. So I started off that. I went into college. I thought I wanted to also be a psychologist. My psychology classes were boring. And so I feel like maybe I shouldn't be on this panel. So I did this thing. I was like, well, what did I get my best grade in? I went to Williams undergrad, and I decided I was getting my best grade in religion. So I was a religion major. I am a Catholic, so I don't know what I was going to do with that major. I wasn't becoming a nun, that was for sure. And from then, I went to law school. I started off representing kids in the juvenile court, which is still probably the best thing I've ever done as a lawyer. It was fabulous. Went into a law firm, decided that I didn't want to be doing papers and finding clients for the rest of my life. And so then I went to Reuters. That was my first foray into media because Reuters at the time, and this is about 2000, was a combination of a tech company, had journalists, it had TV, and we were the vanguard of digital. I famously said and stupidly said to somebody when we were doing a deal with YouTube, and I was like, what is this YouTube? That's never going to catch on. And I was wrong. And so I left Reuters, ended up in the art world at Christie's, and I was their general counsel. So I was actually a lawyer trained. And then I was 38 years old when I became general counsel, and I thought, I don't want to do this for the next 30 years. And I leaned into the business side. So I was chief of staff, COO, CAO. There's a lot of jobs. I can talk about any role. But I wanted to be in media. I loved that, right? The music side of it I loved. I loved TV. And I fortunately got a job offer at A&E Networks, where I went in to be their head of HR and then added on the diversity role. So I love what I do, and I love talking about, like, you don't have to figure out your career path right now as long as you lean into what interests you.
All right. Tasja Kirkwood, head of global insights for Mattel, and I wish I was doing karaoke with you last night. Instead, I was flying here. But yeah, my path was not straight either. I made my way to Mattel through media, but also through tech. So I had an advertising degree, undergrad degree from San Jose State University, and I took a temp job at Google, a one-year assignment. This was a startup called Google at the time. Similar story, because I was applying for grad schools, got into Howard, and they offered me a full-time position at Google, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to grad school, right? So choices. I got my master's in communications from Howard, and I ended up doing an internship at BET. And at the time, that's where they were headquartered. And that's when I really got into media, got super excited about it, knew that's what I wanted to do. But I thought marketing was going to be my path. I was really excited about, sort of showcasing my creativity in that way. Coming out of college, things were not great in the economy. And so there was a one-year position at NBC that was open, and it was in research. And I said, you know what, it was marketing research. I'm going to take the position. I can, add something to my tool belt as far as the research is concerned, but also make connections in the marketing industry. And I thought that would be it. And then I realized really quickly how impactful research was, how you were getting to hold hands with all of the different business units and really have impact throughout. And that's really how my career started in research. From there, went on to work at MTV. Also, I was at Paramount as well for 7 years. And I was in the ad sales realm, and Mattel was actually one of my clients. And so you can see how things just sort of connect, right? It's not necessarily something you're planning for. You take on these opportunities, and you just see sort of where it takes you. And that's really, the moral of my story, which is just try things and see what happens.
Awesome. I think one learning I'm taking from this is, that there's not one path, right? A lot of the panelists here, they came from different backgrounds, different majors, different companies, across many different industries, but it's so great to see, your path that you've all taken. So let's start, I know we have students and recent grads here, so let's talk about the early part of your journey. So maybe we can start with you, Crystal. Like, what are some actions you took early in your career that you felt like were very pivotal and helped you set in the trajectory that you thought was positive and great?
Taking risks, which I probably take too many now. But I would just say, just starting off by taking risks. To everyone's point, I didn't I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I was, at the time, coming into Nielsen. I knew that they had a management rotation program. I knew that it rotated through all aspects of the business, not just the aspects that I loved, right? So I was in IT, wasn't great for me. I was in sports marketing, which I loved because I love sports, but just being willing and open to the possibilities, knowing that there will be connective tissue as you go through your journey and those experiences. Part of knowing what you want to do is understanding what you don't want to do. And you don't understand what you don't want to do until you take on those experiences and take those risks. And so early on, I was eyes wide open and still kind of am to the possibilities of where my career path will take me, that may be outside of any plans that I thought that I had or any relationships that I thought that I had that were going to get me to the next level. So just having that mindset of being open to the possibilities, I think is something that bodes really well, specifically in this industry, as you've seen mergers and acquisitions, consolidations, moving to streaming, all of the things that are happening in our industry yield themselves to someone who is open-minded and being willing to take those twists and turns as the industry does that. And so it's something that's kind of been a part of my DNA, why I was a broadcasting major, because I couldn't sit in psych class and stat class and needed to be out and shooting and, you know, in the field and telling stories. But that mindset is what has led me to where I am today, in that, you know, just being willing to kind of hop around and take what you get from each experience and then pivot it and parlay it into what's coming up next.
Great. What about you, Adwoa?
Very similar,
Yeah.
very similar. Early on, I said yes to pretty much every job, every project, every assignment, even if it was something that I couldn't initially connect the dots about. And it was really because I just was trying to learn as much as I possibly could. And I moved a lot for roles over my career, and I was open, very, very open to different types of jobs, different types of experiences, and I was less concerned at the time about whether or not it would be a promotion or whether or not it fit a certain title or a certain this or a certain that. What I remember feeling early on that I think served me well was, okay, will I learn something new? And if the answer was yes, then I was open to it. And because I didn't know much, the answer was usually yes, you know? So it was something that I think became a habit. You know, the experiences that we have, I think, really help us shape, I think, different behaviors as we evolve as people. And I think I got into the habit of being open because I saw the things that I ultimately probably wanted starting to come to fruition, and by taking pathways that weren't necessarily as most obvious. I think another thing, too, that I'm very fortunate with the people that I surround myself with. And I think early on in my career, and I think it's a really important thing to think about, is who you surround yourself with. And I did surround myself and had some key people who have stood the test of time as being very good supporters of me. And it wasn't always about saying yes to the things that I wanted to do. Sometimes they were questioning it, but challenging me to think about things differently. And in the end, though, still supporting my development, still believing in my ability to achieve, and that helped me believe in my own ability to achieve, because we get various messages in the world, and sometimes those messages do not echo the things that we might personally feel about ourselves. And so having the people around you who can echo the way that you personally feel about yourself in terms of your potential was really helpful for me early in my career, when I think I probably needed it the most.
Great. Karen?
Can I hit real talk early?
Let's do it.
Okay, all right. So
5 minutes in, this is the perfect time. This is the Real Talk starts.
I don't know if it's too heavy or, you know. So I think there's two things when I was coming through. Like I'm looking in this room and it's filled with these incredibly diverse faces, which is phenomenal. That is not what corporations look like still. You know, I'm very proud of what we've done at A&E. We're about 38% people of color, and that matches the society. We've really leaned into that. Most places don't look that way, and the media industry statistics is starting to go in the opposite way, just looking at some of the NAMIC data that just came through. So there are two things that means. Like my mom always used to say, life isn't fair, so accept that, fight against it, but there's some practical realities. So for me coming out, it was, you've got to be 200%. Like somebody else might be able to be 90, you have to be 200, it is what it is. So I went out of my way to make sure I was on it, taking every assignment I could, being incredibly detail-oriented. That's make and break for an attorney, by the way, but it's make and break for most roles. Willing to learn, keep my mouth shut, listen, don't assume I knew it, like just to be in there doing the best so that I could be so good that nobody could say she shouldn't get something. I wanted to make it super obvious. The other part of being successful at work, I think, is the socialization of it all. I grew up in a neighborhood that looked mostly like corporations. I was the only black child in my school. That was incredibly difficult to live in New Jersey in the 70s and 80s like that. There's a lot of stuff that happens there. The good thing about that, though, is when I went into these environments, I was ready for it because I knew it. So I knew how to socialize through it, and that's how connections are made. So I would also say that when you get in there, figure that piece out. I don't think we talk about that enough. How do you socialize with the people there, the higher ups, the middle management? Because in the end, that's where you're going to find those people that I was talking about, your sponsors, who are going to help move you forward. So those were the two things that I leaned into that really helped my career.
I echo everything that's been said so far. I'd say the other thing that I really focused on, because I didn't have that specific pathway, was I was focused on soft skills. So like, what were all the things I could learn and acquire over and over again, right? Just to continue to sort of, like I said, build that tool belt that I mentioned before. So I focused on soft skills. Once I realized I wanted to do research, it was around like, what system could I use, and what, how would I learn qual, and how would I learn quantitative, and like just adding to it every single time, so that no matter what opportunity came about, I was ready, right? So that was an early focus. Also, culture was another thing that I was really interested in. I focused on like the kinds of people I liked being around, the energy I liked being around. You don't always have the choice when you're taking on it. We just talked about you take any and everything, but you also, like you said, learn what you do and don't want within those cultures, and that's how you start to build the career you want to have down the line.
Great, thanks for sharing. I think some themes, that I was reflecting as you all were saying are, one, the constant is change. I think, media especially will be heavily disruptive. Gen AI is coming. We are already at that point. And so I think, that's something I heard. I think another one is be open to everything. So I do, see earlier tenured colleagues, like, I only want to do this one thing, but it's actually, you never know what's going to come up. So being open and ready for additional opportunities sounds like, in your experience has served you well. The third point, and that's really great, and we should dig into this a little deeper, is the idea of mentorship, sponsorship, and supporters. I think sometimes for early tenured, early grads and students, they don't really know what the difference. They think, oh, someone who's a little bit older than me in the industry that, like cares about me or like gives me advice, which is different than sponsors and supporters. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what does that mean to you? And how you in your journey, and then maybe even an example of how it helped elevate you. Anyone?
So I don't mind starting with that. So something you said, Karen, is really important. And Tasha, you touched on this as well. But when you are having a sponsor, so a sponsor being someone who essentially is saying, I'm going to advocate for you and your career when you are not in the room with key people who are decision makers towards whether or not that career advancement occurs for you, right? That's what a sponsor does. Versus a mentor who coaching advice, how can I help you? And that person could be a decision maker, but may not be a sponsor for you, And sponsors, make it easy for people to be a sponsor for you. And the best way to make it easy for someone to be a sponsor for you is to do the things that we're saying up here. But when you are someone who has checked all the boxes and then some, then it does make it really easy for your sponsors to advocate for you. And Tasha, when you talked about the soft skills, those you do have to know, most of the hard skills, that are relevant for the things that you need to do. And the soft skills are things people don't usually focus on. And the soft skills are the things that people probably remember the most about you, right? So did you collaborate well? Are you a leader amongst, your teammates and your peer group? Are you someone that people reach out to because they know that you're so dependable? Those are the things that they're going to go, oh, yes, they have A, B, C, wish they had D and E, but man, they also have X, Y, and Z. And that way, your sponsor can, advocate for you and know how to talk about you in a way that makes other people sit up and listen. And that is kind of what helps open doors. So for me, I had somebody pull me aside, so I was doing, so listen. Earlier in my career, I like to look cute at work.
And you
Still do. But earlier in my career, what that looked like how I would dress in my day-to-day life and how I dressed at work, and I'm in HR, right? So how I dressed at work and was taken seriously was absolutely impacting my career. And I was starting to get feedback about presence. And I didn't really know what that was. And it was nebulous until someone pulled me aside and had a conversation with me around what exactly it was that was causing people to take me as being more junior, more professionally immature, and therefore not take me seriously or take my career aspirations seriously or my advice seriously. So then it was impacting my ability to be as impactful in the workplace. And once I got that very specific feedback, I remember watching who the people were in the room that other people listened to. And I remember, and I was like, okay, there are certain women that they're listening to and paying attention to, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, how are they dressing and what are they doing? And then I just started to oh, I like that, I like this, and pick little pieces of what they were doing that felt like it could fit me. And so not emulating any one human, but taking the bits and pieces that seemed to fit with what I hope to be and still were true to who I am. And then I connected it all together. And I started to notice things changing for me. And then the same person who was a key decision maker who had pulled me aside that was the thing. That was the key question to answer. Does Adwoa have the presence? Can Adwoa claim them? Will people really listen to her? And so then my sponsor who was the person who pulled me aside could advocate. Not only is she and can she, but when she got that feedback, she responded to it. And here's how it showed up. And that was such a really big learning moment for me. And listen, leadership and career is a constant journey. I learn things every day. I'm learning on this panel just as much as all of you are in the audience. But that was one thing that to answer your question on mentorship and sponsorship, that really resonates with me.
Awesome.
I think one of the things, speaking of soft skills, is just that relationship management. It is a two-way street. And so I feel I honestly would say I am who I am today because of mentors and sponsors in my life, period. But that's because it requires a two-way, strong relationship. You need to be just as vested in them as they are of you. You need to check in on them. You need to ask what they're doing. You need to ask, listen, what's the toughest thing that you're dealing with right now? And go somewhere and try and solve it and bring it back to them. They need to know that their investment in you is also giving something back. That's humanity. You want something back for what you give, period, as an individual and as a human. And so I feel like when you try really hard to be the best version of you and you're able to receive feedback from folks and implement it, and you're able to showcase that you think outside of the box and that you add value, it becomes very easy for someone to advocate for you and to say your name when you're not in the room. And then you're starting then to build a brand and a reputation around yourself that is easy to want to be a part of, to latch on to, and to elevate within an organization. So those relationships are so important, specifically in this industry where it's all about who you know, who they know, who's connected to who, and how you can help solve a problem. The best piece about this industry, because it is so dynamic, is because with that dynamic environment comes opportunity. So as we're continuing to evolve as an industry, someone's got to solve some of these problems, and it's going to be y'all. And so you need to figure out what piece of the media and entertainment pie that you want to connect yourself to and try and start to learn the soft and hard skills that will allow you to solve problems. Companies want problem solvers, so be that problem solver and try and figure out what your lane is in that equation.
I'd say totally agree with you. I feel like every position I've ever gotten, any sort of a career advancement, it's all happened through mentors. But that being said, I think another piece of this, you'll hear this a lot. Some people will say bring your whole self to work. right? Which is so challenging. I mean, we've heard the term code switching, we've heard all these things, right? So I'd say it's not necessarily about bringing your whole self, it's about opening yourself up a little bit to show them who you are so that they feel comfortable having those conversations with you it's not always gonna be about work, right? It's about having that picture on your desk, telling them you play softball on the weekends, just these little things that share who you are, that make them feel comfortable having those candid conversations with you. I think that's another piece that's really important.
I think that's a fabulous point because I think sometimes we look at the obvious things like she is female and 5'8" and black, and therefore I am female, 5'8" and black, so she will definitely be my person. I mentioned I'm also Catholic. I am a swimmer, and some of the bonding I've had, for instance, when I was interviewing for my job, I think the reason that the CEO and I had such a great connection is that we started talking about swimming technique, and we were talking about the same technique at the same time. That was our place. So the more that you're sharing about yourself, it's for the purpose of finding those points of connection that might not be so obvious.
Great. I think we've touched upon this, in your story so far, but maybe a more specific question is, what were some of the major roadblocks that you had, maybe more early in your career? So I know, Adwoa, you shared a little bit about the presence piece, and also, I think more importantly, how did you overcome it?
I'll tell a story about myself. I mean, I am super passionate. You can tell I kind of have a big personality, and that can get in the way at work. If I get passionate about something, it's learning to control that, because I think you have to advocate for yourself. Where I see others misstep is when they take that advocacy a step too far. And so for me, it was learning how to make my point in a way that was modulated, that allowed people to hear it without smacking them with it. And I addressed it literally by looking at people that did it better. So this is your point, right? Who are the people that are doing it well and mimicking that? And I also wanted to change it, right? I think sometimes our egos are like, well, they just don't understand me. That I'm like, that's their problem. No, it's your problem. And so it's being able to say, like, I have some great skills, and this thing I'm not doing as well, and I'm going to be humble enough to address that and to work on it. So for me, that's what it was. It was just the willpower to say, I want to keep moving up, and this is not serving me well, so I'm going to fix it.
One of my biggest challenges was early on in my career not having leaders who were advocating for me or wanting me to sort of move up that ladder, right? And so having to figure out a way and navigate to the point of what we've already talked about, which is like taking on certain projects, but also like learning when and how to speak in certain meetings and when I wanted to vocalize to showcase that what I had to say was important and that it had impact, right? And so you have to sometimes find ways to circumvent, because there will be those blockers in the middle of your career that you have to figure out how to navigate around.
I'd say the hardest thing for me was deciding how I was going to show up. So I came into the corporate America space when chief diversity officers weren't really a thing, as you all probably did as well. ERGs are not a thing. Employee resource groups where like-minded folks can come together and coalesce around commonalities, not a thing. And to the earlier point, corporate America was white, and still is, but was white. And so deciding how me, little black girl from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, was going to show up in corporate America, I had to figure out what that looked like. What does it look like style-wise? What does it look like in how I show up in meetings? What does it look like for the kind of job that I want to have? What does it look like for how I know that I want to be an intern? Can I wear sneakers to work? I can, obviously. But that's important to who I am. And so what am I going to give up for right now, knowing that I need to get into the door? And what am I going to hold fast to because it's who I am, and I'm unwilling to compromise any of that while trying to hold a job and afford rent in Manhattan and all the things that are necessary. And so I had to figure out like how's the pendulum going to look, right? And what is that going to mean for the future of my career? When I started, I came into an organization where it was like, okay, we need to recruit communities of color, people of color. Crystal, what do Latinos want? I don't know. I don't know. Or how do we get more Asians in the company? Who knows, right? And so I had to be, first of all, I'm not HR trained, let's be clear about that. Communications, again. But because I was in the position that I was in, coming in eager and ready to learn and help and wanting the company to grow, they did lean on me for those things. And so, no, I didn't know the answer, but I'm gonna damn sure find the answer for you. And so I went on that journey of trying to figure out, listen, what does it take to recruit more people of color into the organization? What do folks need? It's one thing to be diverse, it's another thing to be inclusive and to create a culture that cultivates that mindset. And so how do we build it? So then we started ERGs, I started the Community Affairs Department. We started building all these things just by being a little seed who was willing to help out and try and do the research to get the company there. And so it was trying to figure out how I wanted to show up, what I was willing to compromise, what I wasn't willing to compromise, and then rectifying the two, knowing that I had a higher goal in mind and I was going to get there.
Yeah, I echo everything everyone has said. I think the other thing for me, I just didn't have a ton of confidence when I was starting. And I didn't know, I didn't have many examples of what leadership looked like in a corporate environment. And I was pretty sure that I was gonna be in a corporate environment, right? So I was learning as I was going, and I was nervous to make mistakes, back to what Karen was saying, because I definitely felt pressure around, I was usually one of the only women. I started in manufacturing. My first job was, So I started working for Pepsi when I was earlier in my career, which is a wonderful company, and heavy manufacturing, which means heavily traditionally male, and usually older, right? So I was 20-something years old and female on site, and I needed to command attention and credibility, and I just didn't have the confidence a lot of times to do it. So for me, it was the mental. I think I learned early, over a few years, to be honest, how to build my own mental strength as well, and resilience, and that's one of the things we're talking about, but resilience around the faith in myself, that I could do it, and try to figure a way through some of the struggles and obstacles that I was facing that were a little bit like undercover at times, to be honest. And in the spirit of transparency, you will experience that. There will be detractors, there will be people who are not supporters, and they won't necessarily tell you to your face that they're not supporters, but there will be things that people will do that create barriers that are real, and you still must find a way through, because that will exist regardless. And that was finding the way through was a real obstacle for me.
Yeah, I think that definitely resonates with me. Even in my career, I felt, sometimes I'm on teams at my company and, I'm the only woman, or I'm definitely the only person of color. And so, it's kind of tough being in non-diverse teams, because teams should be diverse. They actually perform better. There's research that, when things are diverse, I think, one theme I'm hearing a little bit across you all is maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, where maybe, I came in not sure what to do, I wasn't sure of how to show up. And so I think especially for diverse, people coming out to the field and media and are, diverse, and this is a very diverse group, like, imposter syndrome might be something you may encounter, or definitely, unfortunately. Sure. So maybe you could share a little bit about, what, if you face it, probably, and then, what it took to kind of work through it, because maybe sometimes we don't ever get through the imposter syndrome.
I still face it. So there's two parts to that to me. One is just this whole idea of getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Get there. Get there. Life is going to be uncomfortable. These positions within your organizations and just your journey is going to be uncomfortable. In fact, it's my personal opinion that if it's not uncomfortable, it's not right, right? So there's a level of uncomfortability that you're just going to have to own it, claim it, and live with it and move through it. But Max and I were just talking about this. It's your tribe, right? So at moments and points in my life and in my career where I'm like, ooh, I got this, they gave this to me. I have people in my corner that are like, oh, sweetie, they didn't give you anything. You earned that. And so having your tribe around you to build you up, when you are having those feelings of doubt, self-doubt, or that you don't belong here, though you don't have anything to contribute, are really important, because you can lean into them for the truth that exists that just isn't showing itself right now in your mental headspace. And that's natural. Like I said, to this day, I still have fits of imposter syndrome, and I lean to my husband and my girlfriends and my tribe that are like, no, You earned this, you're smart, you deserve to be here, now go get it. And then I get fueled up, and then I go back out into the world. So finding your tribe is really important. It's industry agnostic, it's age agnostic, it's ethnicity agnostic. You will know those people and keep them close to you because you will need them and they will need you.
I think that's so right. I borrow something from being a musician. So, I mean, I played a number of instruments. But when you're a singer, and especially when you're studying opera, you are by yourself on a stage. And I've been doing that since I was 10 years old. And there is that moment when you're like, oh boy. And I found, and this is a lesson I've learned, is I focus on the audience. And that really helps because I think when you're feeling imposter syndrome, like it's the internal voice. Whereas if I'm singing, I'm doing what I'm doing now. I'm looking at each of you. I'm reading the room. Like you're seeing who you're trying to bring in. And when that happens, you stop thinking about yourself so much and you just start doing it. And that's the thrill of it, actually. So I turned that into a little bit of a game for myself. I also like to prove people wrong. So when somebody says, and you felt it, right? You take a new job. When I started my job at A&E, there were people who were like, well, no, she didn't come from media. She didn't have X, Y, Z. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. That's irritating. I've always had this all my life. And I'm hesitating because I'm like self-censoring the words I actually said to myself, and because they're super inappropriate and unprofessional. But I have that fire and spirit within me, and that motivates me to keep going too.
For me, it was also about the reframe because to everyone's point, we still go through it, right?
Yeah.
But I had to reframe it for myself. I'd look around, I wouldn't see people that looked like me in the room, and then I realized when I would say something, how people were like holding on to every word that I was saying, right? And so I had to start thinking about how valuable my opinion was, or the work that I was doing was, especially when I was giving, I'm in research, right? So we're constantly talking about different communities, and right now I'm working on dolls, right? So let's say, what kind of hair should this doll have, right? Especially when it's a doll that's targeted towards African Americans, right? And so they're looking directly at me and asking me the question, right? Me knowing that there's not one singular experience of being Black, but still understanding how important it is for me to sort of give my opinion, even though it may seem challenging at times. So that was just, for me, it was just about the reframe.
Yep.
I love that. I think I'm going to butcher this, but I think one of my mentor sponsors said it's one thing where, you get invited to the event, but it's another thing when you're getting invited to dance, right? There's a difference between come to the meeting versus, hey, Tiffany, come and have a speaking role in it. So I think that's also something important that I'm hearing across all of you. Crystal, I love what you were saying about the tribe. And that's really important. I think it's related to a little bit about the mentorship, sponsorship network. But what are, as you all are starting your journey or, in the early stages, what does a good tribe look like? What are kind of the core qualities that, you look for that's almost like the two-way street for support?
My tribe is so wild. They're all
First
over
is wild.
Yeah, they're all over the place. It's funny, I was just watching the Michelle Obama special on Netflix, and she was talking about her kitchen table, and it's the same thing. It's your tribe, your kitchen table, the people that you surround yourself with. But for me, it's you have your risk takers, your daredevils, your folks that will just tell you go do it all the time. Who there's obviously immense value in that because they're the ones who are going to pump you up and get you to the point where you actually realize how amazing you are inside. And then you have the folks that are a little more reserved that tell you, the straight and narrow, maybe you should think about it this way, think about all aspects of the decision before you make the decision. The other ones are like, make the decision, just do it. And then, and so you find yourself being able to center in the middle of that. And so I guess my point is your tribe isn't homogenous. It is made up of folks from different walks of life, different industries, different points in your life. I have a preschool friend to a college roommate, all in that tribe because you evolve as an individual and they know different points of you. And so to have a kitchen table that brings all of those elements of you into one singular voice is powerful. So it's diverse, your tribe is diverse and still that they always will have your back regardless of the decisions that you make. They'll pick you up off the floor and they'll lift you up when you succeed.
But add in the honest friend, and the honest friend is so important,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Because I can always tell, I was like, you needed to add somebody else to that tribe when people come back, because you clearly didn't have the friend that was like, all right, look.
Yep.
I love that because I'm that friend, and so, but like, and look, you should have friends that lift you up. But your friends that tell you honesty are the ones that I think that move you ahead further, because they're hard truths, and when you're at your worst, they're there for you, and they're still trying to move you forward, because the friends that are just like, you're the best, will give you the worst work advice you can possibly get.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'd say my tribe is not always directly related either to like what I'm doing on a daily basis for my job. So I also do a little bit of like acting and improv. I did that on the side. And so that tribe, they provided me with something completely different, right? I learned how to be more confident on stage. I learned how to, right? It didn't have to be a one-to-one. So understanding that like you can get inspiration from anywhere in your life is really key too.
Yeah.
Yeah, my crew is small. My parents used to tell me if I had more than 5 friends, I had too many. and they would tell me all the time, why are y'all laughing? Because I was like, I thought this is what parents say.
Told me.
Because my parents told me that all the time. But now, as a woman, I see the value of that. And my crew is like 5 people. And there's a couple of people who are family, and like certain family members who everyone consistently is very real, to your point, Karen. Every one of these people is real. And some of them are real and blunt, and some of them are real and tactful. And some of them are in a professional space, and some of them know nothing about that, but they know me, to your point, Crystal, as well. And what I think has been helpful around who you surround, like the tribe and your kitchen table, is to a T, all of them will celebrate my wins.
Yeah.
And that was when I knew to start plucking people out of the tribe. When I was excited about something and they were like, well, what are you gonna do about this? And we're gonna do da. When they were looking for all the reasons why I should be less excited, less happy, less driven, less this, less that, that was when I knew those folks shouldn't have been as tight with me. And some of those were some of those were the people that I had known the longest. Sometimes they are family. But that just means there are certain moments, certain things that they're not at the table for, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Like, sometimes you do need to make those tough calls on, like, weeding people out. But the ones who are there, I echo what everyone has said. The other thing I would just say is that they're there to celebrate with me when things are worth celebrating.
Awesome.
Yep.
I think we are nearing, maybe a little bit, we have some more time. So for the audience, they're just starting their journey. What are some pieces of, like, what's the one? Actually, let's just stick to one. What's the one piece of advice when you're just starting out? In 5 words or less. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, man.
So I would say stay true to yourself. I talked about, I am religious, actually, and so I don't work on Sundays. And so when I was starting out, people thought that was strange. You'll never get a job. You must be 24/7. And I remember my mom early on said, no, stay true to yourself, because you'll end up in the places that respect that. And so I have not worked on a Sunday since I was, I think, 25 years old, and I still got to where I got to. And that's it seems counterintuitive. That means I do give 24/6, but it has allowed me, right? But that 7th day she rests. But it allows me to maintain my integrity, realize there's things that are more important to me, and following that through, I think I think that is fundamental to my success in my career journey.
We haven't talked as much about this, but I think be curious. I think like an undertone, I think, of a lot of the things that we've talked about today has been just having a sense of learning, curiosity, openness, flexibility. I think being curious about what's ahead is crucial.
To that point, I'd say authenticity also, which is what we've talked about previously, but just show them who you are a little bit, right? I used to come in and I'd act a certain way because I thought that's how I was supposed to act. And as soon as I started to be a little me, I realized very quickly how amazing that was and how it helped me in my career also. So just be authentic to the best of your ability.
Now, what am I supposed to say after y'all say that? You know what? I don't know if it's the one thing, but just trying to find your superpower. And you touched on this earlier. That's one of the things where people always ask, like, what do you wish you would have done sooner? Found my superpower and leaned into it and not been apologetic for it. To your point, you realize that the one thing that may set you apart in the room is the one thing that everyone is dying to know more about, and the one thing that's going to advance your career and your company in ways that it wouldn't have if you were not sitting in that seat. And so the minute you start to understand what your superpowers are, the beauty of unleashing them in these types of environments that we work in is success. And you start to see that actualized in how the company performs, how projects are done, and how wins are had. And so just trying to find out what your superpowers are and doubling down on those in any environment, whether it's comfortable or not, I think has been really beneficial, and something that I wish I would have done earlier, an exercise that I would have embarked on earlier.
I completely agree with you. I think for me too, there's an inkling for students or early grads, like, I just want to be good in everything.
Yep.
Everything, this is the checklist, like, I'm just going to be amazing in everything. But I think, maybe Crystal, is saying as well is, like, what are the 3 things you're amazing in? And focus on that, because if you're really good in everything versus super amazing in 3, the super amazing in 3, may take you farther. So that's something that also, like, skills-based development, in some companies you may have that, but that's something that, companies really care about. So I know you guys all mentioned some challenges that you've had in your career. So advice specifically on, when you were first starting out in the early stages, and there will be challenges in the very beginning. What is some advice on that front? How to mitigate, how to speak up, how to talk through it? What are some, like, tips and tricks on how to get around those?
Just do it. Just do it. Not to Nike it, but just do it. Like, if there are things that you want to say them. And there are ways in which you can do things that allow for your voice and your opinions to still be heard, but to do it in a way that is respectful of the environment in which you work in.
That's right.
And so being able to discern the two is really important, and a skill that you learn over time. You don't just, come out the bat learning that, but it's really key. And I'll give you an example. So I had an HR colleague who was in a meeting with our employee resource groups and said something that was offensive. Senior colleague. And I could have, in that moment, because I knew that all of my colleagues around me were rolling their eyes and upset and couldn't believe that they said this. And I was doing that in my head. But instead of doing that, I pulled them to the side and I had the conversation. Listen, I am going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you didn't mean X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to tell you how the audience perceived that. And then you can make a choice as to how you want to address it, acknowledge it, ignore it, whatever the case may be. But I wouldn't be who I am if I just sat there and rolled my eyes and didn't say anything and speak up. Yeah, you're, at that time, 5 levels ahead of me in this organization. You still offended me. And so I need to figure out how to do that. I will tell you that to this day, one of the strongest relationships that I have, because no one had given that open and honest feedback. Everyone talked about them behind their back. And that built a relationship and a bond between us that is unmatched. That has opened doors for me in other companies. We now still stay in touch. It just is a common thread of respect and a value for opinion that I think helped. So there's a time and a place for all of it, but don't silence your voice. Just figure out the respectful way to do it that honors how you're feeling, but then honors the environment in which you're in.
Yeah, I agree with you, Crystal. And what I also heard you say with that is, when you're giving feedback to someone, as much as whatever is happening may be frustrating or on top of mind for you, your intention should be, how is the organization better, the team better, the work better, something else external to you is, or the person better as a result of me sharing this. It's not just for you to vent and get stuff off your chest, right? So, and it shouldn't come across that way, because if it comes across as, well, you messed up and let me tell you about all the ways that you messed up or something like that, then that's really just you making sure that you feel better because you've let out what's inside of you. But if it's with that, and here's how it impacted, I'm sure that's not what you want, so let's talk about why that happened. that is more about making sure that person in the future is more successful, communicates more effectively, has better impact, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something I didn't really learn until much later, to be honest with you. But that is like excellent unlock, I think, between just being opinionated and having opinions that people value in the room, if that makes sense.
I also think when your roadblock is self-created, apologize. One of the earliest things I remember is messing up in the law firm, and I went to the partner and said, this was my mistake, I don't want anybody else to get in trouble for it. As a result, nobody got in trouble. The partner said to there's a mid-year associate, the people in between, I cannot believe this junior person actually did this thing where she took accountability for a mistake. That got me so much further in the firm off a mistake, because ownership and accountability is rare. And it doesn't mean you don't do this, oh, I'm sorry, you know, you're not a mouse. When you generally make a mistake, don't try to pass it off, don't try to blame somebody else, just go in and own it. I promise you, it will take you to a different place, because it makes you stand out as different.
Yeah, I'd say, piggybacking off what you guys were talking about, I think bravery, right? So a little bit of bravery in everything you're doing, and then also being solutions oriented, right? Because we can all walk in and say what's wrong, but we don't all come in and say how we can fix it. So I think being solutions oriented, and that little piece of bravery as well. I can remember, you know, in my early days in one of the media companies I worked at, I was in a sales room, and they were showing a piece of content. And they were trying to figure out how to sell it, what the marketing was going to be. And I remember watching the show and looking around for like the eyes that would meet mine, thinking like, how did this show get made? Who did the research on this show? How did it even make it into this room? And there was no one. And so I had to be the one raising my hand, asking the question, something that would cost them a lot of money. But I also knew what it would do to the brand if they actually went out and aired this show, right? So a little bit of bravery and a little bit of like, okay, what do we do next? And how can we make these small tweaks to sort of change it, right? Those are the things to think about as you're sitting in those rooms.
I love that. I think, you know, what I'm hearing across all of you is like the ability to have difficult conversations in a very tactful way that is solution oriented and gets across first, just sharing, you know, the reaction. So I think that's wonderful. So as, you know, if I were applying for a job to work with you all, you know, if I was a recent grad in the media industry, like what, you know, if you're interviewing me, like what would the qualities you look out for?
So I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, actually. So ability to collaborate, really not just thinking about the tasks that you have to get done, but also caring about how the tasks that you're getting done impact other groups. And something, admittedly, that I'm starting to notice a bit more is, so the other quality that we're looking for is, I call it intestinal fortitude, just like strength of character, maybe it is courage and bravery. There are a lot of influences at work. And peer pressure doesn't stop after school, right? Like we all learn that. Peer pressure happens at work all the time. And what we also want to make sure is that when we're bringing people into the organization, there's always going to be people going, zzz, you know, and what do you do when someone goes zzz in your ear? And knowing that you would have the ability to stand true to something that's aligned with your values, but not just acquiesce to a counterpart because they're being vocal, right? So those are two things. Obviously, someone who's got a drive for results, but honestly, one thing we just recently added in is kindness at work. So that's literally a competency that we now recruit for. Yay, recruiting team, who's here? And what that means is, how are you at delivering feedback? How are you at speaking to people? Do you, are you sharing, like when you do something great, do you share it with other people to help make their work easier? Or do you like hoard it? And so there are different, obviously, descriptors around that, but kindness at work is something that matters, and as you all know, and it keeps the great people there, you know, wanting to create great work that's impactful. And in our industries, we need great people doing great things because it touches lives literally all over the world. So those are what we're looking for.
I would say someone who's willing to exist in the gray. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. None of this is defined, at least in my world. None of this is defined. Everything is so dynamic within this space. And so you're not going to get out of your first job, with me at least, when you sit down at the table, a blueprint of what you need to do Monday through Friday. You have got to be able to live in the gray. Your day is going to look different every single day, and you have to be able to survive and thrive in that space. My job is to make my boss's job easier to create solutions. So then your job is to help make my life easier to create solutions. And it's cyclical, and her job is to make our CEO's life easier. And that's just the role that you play. And so solutions oriented, to you all's point, being willing to, survive and thrive in the gray and still be self-motivated enough to create solutions and be bold enough to present those solutions and stand by the role that you play in helping to solve for the challenges that you've unearthed are really important, because this industry is moving a mile, all industries are moving a mile a minute at this point. And so being able to show that you are a solution to a problem at the company right out the gate, meaning show up having done your research, ask the right questions, have questions to ask back to the person that you're interviewing with that are thoughtful. Talk about how you can start to solve, what the ideas that you have to solve some of those issues, and where you think the industry is going from your point of view, because they're looking for you because they don't have that point of view in the organization. So again, back to that secret sauce, your sprinkles, your hot sauce, whatever it is, expose that in these interviews and conversations, because there's value to that. It's your superpower, and it's what companies and organizations need. So that's my long-winded answer, but just solutions-oriented, thrive in the gray, harness your superpower, and be able to communicate that. And in addition to kindness, because that is so important and so missing in corporate America these days, just being a human and being kind and thoughtful and sharing. All the things I tell my 7 and 8-year-old are very applicable to, roles within this industry.
I mean, I can take some pressure off, because I agree with that. The questions are really important. Do your research. That's something totally in your control. Here's what I don't care about. I don't care about where you went to school, and I don't care about what your jobs were, because I had my own share of college and grad school internships, whatever. If you come in, you're not going to know the industry from those. You're going to get such a small piece of it, honestly. And so I am literally looking for somebody showing up that is showing all those pieces that Crystal said. So I know there's a lot of stress put on some things. We discount them completely, because also a lot of that is just socioeconomic, what you had the opportunity to do. We do not want that influencing our decisions about who we hire at A&E.
So in insights, I'd say critical thinking is something I'm looking for a lot. You mentioned kindness, but I'd take it a step further to empathy, right? And that's extremely important when we're going out there and trying to bring the voice of the consumer into an organization. We have to do the research in a way that's empathetic so that we get those responses that we need to really truly understand who the consumer is, right? And then it's also about how we're dealing with each other, right? It plays a role in everything we're doing. I'd say the other thing that I always think about, it's the one question I always ask myself, is what can I learn from you, right? Because you're always thinking about, what I want and what I'm looking for and all of these things, but I also want to know what you're bringing in that is different from anyone else on my team, and, setting yourself apart from the rest of my team so that they can also learn from you guys too.
I love that. I think, I manage a couple of teams at my company, and when we do a lot of staffing, so you have a pool of consultants and you staff, different teams based on, different projects. And I love this because we basically do mini interviews all the time when we do staffing calls. And the one quality I love is, I heard on a call, I was like, do you know how to do this? She's like, I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out. I don't know. And that's all I need. I need someone who will just figure it out, and it's okay, because for early business analysts, they don't come with an expertise of decades, and that's not the point. So I think that is something I've been hearing, you all say in different elements about qualities. Great.
100%.
I think we have time for any last reflections, but I think if not, we can go into Q&A. I see some mics ready, so we can get started on Q&A maybe.
Sure.
I love this. There's microphones, and feel free to stand up and head on over. I can stand up. Okay.
Oh, the mic.
Oh.
Taking feedback.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carl with a K, former recruiter from Goldman Sachs. I just want to thank you all so much for being relatable and sharing all of your advice and tips. And I wanted to follow up on the questions of, what do you do when you have passions and interests outside of what you're doing 9 to 5? I want to say I've heard about, singing, opera singing. I've heard about acting classes. And I heard it somewhere that, this is a generation that is self-made. We're no longer paying our dues and working a 9 to 5. But for some of us, we're still maybe trying to validate those experiences in a corporate setting while also nurturing our passions outside of it. What is a strategy that you have for owning in on what you do professionally, but also becoming, getting a superpower done outside of your workspace?
Good question.
Yeah, I can speak to it. So I don't know if this is popular or not, but I actually took a little time off in between, right? I was working at 2 media companies. I took 2 years off in between, and I decided I really wanted to hone in on the craft piece. Everyone doesn't have that luxury, I know, but for me, it was really important to explore it. And so what I'd say is, try and figure out the connective tissue, right? So there's those passions that you have, like I said. You can pull certain elements of that passion. Like for me, it was acting, right? I said it was standing up in front of a crowd or being able to relate to people or, the networking piece. Like it all ties together. So figure out what the connective tissue is so that you can utilize both and take the learnings from both to help excel your career. I feel like also just like sharing the tidbit of information that I do improv and that I've done stand-up before in casual conversations, people thought that was so fascinating.
Yeah.
It opened up the door to like all these conversations, and they also felt like I was a little brave. They were like, oh my God, I wouldn't get that from you at work, right? And so it just opened up this new element. So try and figure out what the connective tissue is between the two, and also make room for it. Yeah. Because what will happen is you will get so inundated with work. I wish I was the 24/6. I'm the 24/7, right? And if you don't hold that space sacred for your passions, it will affect you in so many other ways, but it's inclusive of work.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is the prioritization. So, there is just the fact that, early days, that's going to shift. It's going to be more work. And as you get more senior, obviously, you start being more efficient. You have bigger teams. You can find more time. I think I made peace with myself that in the early days, the priority was just going to shift to where I wanted to be, which was to have an apartment in the West Village and now have an apartment in Tribeca, right? And that's the realist in me. Also, though, I became a morning person. So I get up at 5:15. I'm in the pool at 5:30. So I added on. I never said, what?
I am not.
Because I love to swim. And you don't want to see, I went swimming this morning. You don't want to see me when I haven't swum after doing karaoke till late. So that's and it's just so I just adjusted what I was going to be because I wanted to fit that in.
The only other thing I'll add, and I know we have mad questions on the side, is when you do find those things, you may think that it doesn't connect, and you realize that it does when you just talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. So in 2020, I started boxing because post the murder of George Floyd, I realized that I had a lot of pent up, anger, and being in the position that I was in, I was receiving it from employees who were coming to me for advice and all of those things, and I had to take that, I had to explain it to my 3 kids, I had to be in this world and be Black, and all of that was a lot. And so I started boxing in a gym, and it unleashed so many things for me and connected me to my colleagues at Showtime, which is under the Paramount umbrella. And we started talking about boxing and what that looks like in content. And so you never realize when you talk about your passions at work how they may be a connective tissue to some of the things that you do in your 9 to 5. Sure.
Thank you. Yep.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Eric Sowers, and I am a student in Queensborough Community College. I just have the question that has been going around in my head, which is, what are the strategies to implement in when it comes to pursuing multiple careers at once? Like, say, for an example, you wish to do filmmaking, but you wish to veer off into music and as well as either animation or acting later on.
Yep. My only advice would be choose a company that has a lot of those elements under one umbrella, right? So when you have big companies like Paramount and Hearst and others, we have music, we have obviously acting and film, we have bits of journalism, we have bits of sports and news. So if you are are open to the multitude of opportunities available to you, and you choose a company that has those different departments in it, then you have an opportunity to explore. Yeah, you have your real 9-to-5er, but then go and do a little internal internship with another part of the business, or do a little informational interview with some folks that are other parts of the business, so that you can learn and grow within this safe environment of where you currently exist.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Ananya, and I'm a graduate student at the New School. My question is pretty similar to what he just asked, but a little more deeper about versatility. So when we start saying yes to many things, I feel like it could divert you from your one goal. And as much as doing many things can broaden your skill set, it gets challenging, especially on your resume, because it can start looking very confusing. You're like, oh, this person's done this, this, this is like, what is this person really looking to do? So how to bring that focus or sort of narrow down your interests to one, to one goal, and how can you, do you have any ideas on how we can, gravitate to our one true calling, if there is even such a thing?
Well, I mean, I gravitated to mine. I mean, so I think what I did is I kept finding things adjacent. So I started off as a lawyer, and then I went into commercial law. By commercial law, I got to work with the business and people, and I started doing employment work. And then I was like, oh, I really love this employment work. That led me to be chief of staff and the business side, giving up law. So what I was doing is recognizing the skill sets within each thing I was doing, and then taking pieces of those and leaning into them, and taking pieces of those and leaning into them. So it wasn't super disjointed, it was just following my path. Now I will say, and I'll get booed by the room because this is very generational, I did not expect to move to the next thing that quickly. I think that pace has moved up. I'm a kind of 3-year person. Something for 3 years and I'm ready for the next thing. I know it is faster now. That probably is the biggest rub, by the way, when you're talking to HR people my age, because we're looking and we're like, well, wait, sorry, every 3 months there's a new job, so keep that in mind, and I recognize that is changing, but lean into enough to really understand the thing that you're doing before you leave for the next thing, is what I would say.
Yeah. To your point, it's also hard to make to build the relationships when you're bouncing around that quickly. So again, I too am always like on the fence, maybe unpopular, but you want to know that when you're investing in someone and the amount of time it takes to invest and give and sort of share that institutional knowledge, that you're also getting that return on investment too. So I'd say maybe hang out for a little bit. The other piece I would say is every year I do my professional goals, but then I also do my personal goals. And I create a framework, and it's very simple, right? It's like my 3 things. Right? Because you're right, you're trying to boil the ocean. There's no way you're gonna be able to do it all. We like, you said you like music, you like art, you like this, you like that, right? And it's amazing, but you can't explore it all at the same time or explore it well. Yeah. So why not focus on 2 or 3 for the year and then see where it takes you, and you can always pivot. That's the other thing I'd say.
Yep. Yeah. Love that. And I think the only other, I agree with what everyone has said, and then I think the other thing that, when I was saying yes to a bunch of different things, I was pretty clear about what my end goal was. And so, not everybody is, but if you are pretty clear about what your end goal is, then you can whittle down, like, how does this thing I'm saying yes to fit into that goal, right? But if it fits in, then the answer is yes, right? But that requires a level of clarity. If you don't know, like, if you don't even directionally know the end goal, then yeah, 100% agree. You can't just say yes to everything, so everybody is correct. And I do think, going back to what Crystal was saying, I feel like one of the things that was probably a game changer for me in hindsight was that I started my career at really large companies. Yep. So I started at Pepsi, 300,000 employees over the world, right? I was only in the US. And then I worked at Nestle, it's like also mega. So because of that, I could get my itch out to like move around. I did change jobs every year, actually. But sorry, but I would do it mostly within the company. So I worked at Nestle for 6 years. I had like 7 jobs.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, but it was a real benefit to it. So that's not, not everybody can do that, but that is one of the ways that you can give yourself really varied experiences without looking like you're bouncy in an organization too.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next question.
Yes, hi. My name is Gabriella. I am a motivational speaker and content creator. And I really just wanted to ask you guys if, how do you kind of balance that kind of adding on to the previous question, how do you balance out having and owning your own like startup business? Because I'm kind of working on building a business in motivational speaking, but I'm also very passionate about media. So how can you kind of like balance the two? I mean, I know they're kind of both under the entertainment umbrella. And how do you also kind of deal with that burnout from trying to you know, kind of balance the two things that you're very passionate about? Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. So the latter first, balancing the burnout is doing exactly what that first question was all about. Trying to figure out how you lean into the things outside of your organization that bring you joy. You have to keep those things that bring you joy into your portfolio in order to keep yourself energized and ready to do the things that you need to do. The two things that you described, public motivational speaking and being in media entertainment, there, to your point, there's huge connective tissue there, right? And so a couple of things. A lot of companies are looking for someone who can clearly talk about their mission, vision, values externally for them as an organization. And it doesn't have to be the most senior leaders in the organization. And so your ability through motivational speaking to be comfortable on stage, to be able to storytell through a narrative, to be able to connect with audiences, those are like key fundamental things that any organization would die for. And so being able to harness your passion in doing that and parlay it into what the goals of the organization are and being a beacon for them is invaluable. So I think because that is something that you're interested in and that you're really good at, the idea of putting yourself forward as a vessel to be able to do that for the organization is really key. And just using your voice and raising your hand in those opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, I'm Chanel. I'm a graduating senior at NYU and an Emma Bowen Fellow. So my question, I know you guys talked a lot about like giving and receiving feedback, and I learned a lot that I didn't know. Mine is more about like taking mistakes that you've made and letting go of them, moving past them, but also growing from them without like, you know, constantly like being reminded of it and like cringing at yourself, which is like something I really struggle with.
Me too, girl.
I make a lot of mistakes. Like, I think we all do, right? I mean, it's resilience. To me, it comes down to resilience, which is recognizing that everybody is making mistakes. For me, the thing is, do you fix the one you made or do you keep making them over and over? So the ownership piece is, now I've fixed this and recognize that everybody else is doing it. And for me, that is how I manage that. The other thing I would just say as you go into the corporate environment is there are going to be a lot of people that pretend they don't make mistakes.
Oh, baby.
That is to get in your head.
Yep.
Ignore them because they do. And so if you know that everybody does. There's a bunch of people pretending that they don't. You're not out there funky, and then find your resilience, which is just, yeah, I did this. Here's what I'm doing to address it, and knowing you won't do it again. It comes back under your control, and I feel when things are under my control, I feel less helpless about them.
Yeah.
You also press forward to find that next win, right? So it helps you get over the barrier of the quote-unquote mistake, right? So you said the ownership, then you fix it, then you work on that next thing that sort of gets you that win that makes you feel confident about, you know, what you're doing every day.
But know that failure will happen again, though.
That's
like
right.
every day,
Every time.
every day something's gonna fail. That's how I feel. Every day I'm gonna fail at something. I'm gonna send someone in their Easter costume on Halloween to school. I'm going to, something is going to fail every single day. That's the spice of life. And so when you realize that, and you lean into the fact that there are things that are in my control and some that aren't, some that were in my control that did fail, but I'm gonna bounce back up. It's the get back. It's not what happened, it's how you bounce back up from it. And that is my biggest adult life lesson, and my biggest corporate life lesson is that something is going to fail, and that is okay, and it's how you respond to it and how you move through it is what builds character and strength in you as an individual.
That's actually my make or break for success in a company. When
Yep.
you're giving feedback and you see the people that can take it and adjust and don't melt
Yep.
down, I know immediately that person's the rising star.
Yes.
That is it's so clear because it's such an important skill.
Yep.
Yeah.
The person who's devastated,
Yeah. You'll carry that into leadership too, right? Because sometimes the failure will be your team's. It
Yep.
won't be yours, but you're the one who has to take the brunt of that. You're the one who has to figure out how to navigate it. And so you'll take that into leadership also once you learn that skill.
And the only other thing I would say is you don't get to more senior roles without making mistakes.
Yep.
So I think you should just, not only is it about like owning the mistake, just like accept that this is like a good thing actually to go through the process of making mistakes, learning from it, and moving forward, because it's the learning that you get from the mistake in most of the cases that ends up fueling.
Yeah, I'd say happy accidents too. I want to say, like in research, sometimes we make a mistake and we uncover something even better. True. So learning how to maybe like change the thought process around it too. Also,
The Post-it note and the pretzel. Those are examples.
yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ashley. Sorry. It's just everybody looked back. So, hi, my name is Ashley. I am a senior at Lehman CUNY grad, and then I'll be a grad student in the fall. My main goal is to become the first disabled news anchor of color. My question is, I have my own like news virtual newspaper. However, since I'm trying to become a news anchor, how do I not become like the competition, but at the same time be collaborative, knowing that I'm trying to be a news anchor? And how do I find a mentor?
Interesting.
I just want to make sure I understand your question. So because you have your own publication, right?
Yeah, I create content for the disabled community, but knowing that seems like kind of a competition, how do I, when I apply for a job, how do I not seem like I'm like someone's competition?
So go ahead. No, go ahead. I don't know if you look at the diversity efforts and initiatives of a lot of organizations right now, and I'll even speak to my own organization, we are trying to do a lot of work with the disability community. And so instead of thinking of it as competition, I would think of it as an opportunity to advance the goals and the targets and all the things that these companies are transparently displaying out there externally as you being additive to the efforts that they are trying to advance. Look at what they're doing. Everything is in either an ESG or sustainability report. It's in a diversity, equity, and inclusion report. It's in a corporate social responsibility report. You will see where their values are with that community. And so I would look at what you're building and creating as an opportunity to expose where you could be helpful or useful to that organization, and I would pivot it in that way, is my advice in that space.
And I think, also companies are so big. So really competition for us, if we're at A&E, we're talking about AMC, or if we're feeling cocky, NBC Universal. So the piece that you're bringing is an additive piece that we actually encourage. And we get excited when people come in and want to do, we've had people develop their own channels, their own fast channels. We've had people do their own podcasts, and we bring that into the organization. I think your mentor question is an interesting one. For me, the best way to get a mentor is to find somebody that you're interested in and say, can I talk to you?
Yep. Yeah.
That's it. People love to talk about themselves. And if you say, could we set up time like once a quarter for me to just learn more about you? I think people I've never heard anybody say no to that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you.
Great.
Yep.
I think we're
Done
good
and
unless
done.
there's any last reflections.